The desert wind howled like a wounded coyote, whipping sand across the endless expanse of New Mexico territory. It was the summer of 1882, and the sun hung merciless in a bleached sky, turning the earth into a furnace that could cook a man's brain inside his skull. Calder Wyatt squinted against the glare, his weathered hand shading eyes the color of storm clouds. 3 days he'd been tracking his missing cattle. 3 days of following hoofprints that disappeared and reappeared like ghosts in the shifting sands. "Damn fool beasts," he muttered, voice rough as sandpaper from the dust. His horse, a sturdy bay mare named Buttercup, a name that never failed to amuse the other cowboys at the trading post, picked her way carefully through a maze of sagebrush and prickly pear. Calder had stopped being embarrassed about the name years ago. The mare had earned it, gentle as spring rain despite her size. The trail led him toward Coyote Canyon, a godforsaken slash in the earth where only rattlesnakes and outlaws made their homes. Calder checked his Colt .45, a habit born from 4 years fighting in the war between the states and another decade surviving in this lawless territory. The weapon sat heavy on his hip, as familiar as his own heartbeat. He was about to turn back the cattle weren't worth dying for when Buttercup's ears pricked forward. She nickered soft and nervous, dancing sideways like she'd spotted a snake, but it wasn't a snake that caught Calder's attention. Through the shimmering heat waves, he saw the lone cottonwood tree that marked the entrance to the canyon. Something hung from its largest branch, something that moved. "Easy, girl," Calder soothed, though his own pulse quickened. He'd seen men hanged before, too many times. It was the frontier's favorite form of justice, swift and final. But as he rode closer, spurring Buttercup despite her protests, he realized this was different. It was a woman, a girl. Really, couldn't be more than 18 or 19 summers. Native, by the look of her long black hair tangled by wind, doe-skin dress torn and dusty. Her hands were bound behind her back, and she hung by a rope looped under her arms rather than around her neck. Not a hanging then, but something crueler. They'd left her to die slow in the desert sun, a torture that could take days. Calder didn't think, just acted. He pulled his knife and urged Buttercup close to the tree. The girl's eyes flew open, dark as midnight and wild with fear. She tried to speak, but only a croak emerged from her parched throat. "Hold still," Calder commanded, reaching up to saw at the rope. "I'm getting you down." The rope was new, store-bought hemp that resisted his blade. Sweat stung his eyes as he worked, conscious of how exposed they were. Whoever had done this might still be watching, might have left her as bait. But Calder had never been able to walk away from suffering. A weakness, some might say, though his mother had called it virtue. The rope finally parted, and the girl dropped. Calder caught her awkwardly, her slight weight nearly pulling him from the saddle. She was burning with fever, lips cracked and bleeding. He fumbled for his canteen, supporting her against his chest as he tipped water between her lips. "Slow now," he cautioned as she gulped desperately. "Too much too fast and you'll be sick." Her hands were still bound, the knots swollen tight. Calder cut those too, noting the raw wounds where she'd fought against them. Someone had wanted her to suffer. The thought made his jaw clench with an anger he hadn't felt since the war. He looked around, scanning the canyon walls and the open desert beyond. No movement save the lazy spiral of a hawk high overhead. But the feeling of being watched crawled up his spine like a scorpion. "Can you ride?" he asked the girl. She nodded weakly, though he doubted she could stay upright for long. He made a decision that would change everything, though he didn't know it then. "You're coming with me." Getting her onto Buttercup took some doing. She could barely stand, legs buckling like a newborn foal's. Calder ended up lifting her bodily into the saddle, then swinging up behind her. She slumped against him, radiating heat through his shirt. "What's your name?" he asked as they started back across the desert. No answer. Maybe she didn't speak English, or maybe she was too far gone to try. "I'm Calder Wyatt. Got a little ranch about 5 miles north. Nothing fancy, but there's shade and clean water. Still nothing. Her breathing was shallow, labored. Calder urged Buttercup to a faster pace. Though the noon heat was brutal, the mare, true to her nature, seemed to understand the urgency. She stretched into a ground-eating lope that would have impressed those who mocked her name. They were 2 miles from his ranch when Calder spotted the dust cloud. Riders, moving fast from the direction of Cedar Falls. His gut tightened. Could be anyone, cowboys, traders, cavalry patrol. Or it could be whoever had strung up the girl. He shifted course, angling toward a cluster of red rocks that offered cover. The girl stirred, a soft moan escaping her. Her eyes opened briefly, focused on his face with surprising intensity, then closed again. The riders passed a 1/4 mile to the south, 5 men moving with purpose. Calder caught a glimpse of blue uniformed cavalry then. That should have been reassuring, but something about their hurried pace suggested trouble. He waited until the dust settled before continuing home. His ranch wasn't much to look at, a 2-room adobe house, a corral made of mesquite branches, a well that hadn't run dry yet, but after 3 days in the desert, it looked like paradise. Calder carried the girl inside, her weight nothing compared to the wounded men he'd hauled through Georgia mud. He laid her on his narrow bed, the only one in the place. She looked small and fragile against the rough wool blanket, more child than woman despite her age. Calder fetched water, clean cloths, and the medical supplies he kept for emergencies: carbolic acid, bandages, a bottle of whiskey for pain. He worked carefully, cleaning the rope burns on her wrists, checking for other injuries. There were bruises on her arms, a gash on her forehead crusted with dried blood. Someone had beaten her before stringing her up. The anger came again, cold and steady. She woke while he was tending her wrists, jerking away with a gasp. Her eyes darted around the room, taking in the rifle propped by the door, the sparse furnishings, the barred window. When they settled on Calder, he saw the fear there, raw and desperate. "Easy," he said, holding up his hands. "You're safe. I'm just cleaning these cuts." She watched him warily, body tense as a drawn bow. Calder moved slow, telegraphing each action. He'd gentled enough wild horses to know that trust came hard to the frightened. "You got a name?" he tried again. "Family I should send word to?" She shook her head. Just once. Whether that meant no name or no family, he couldn't tell. "All right then. I'll call you Lena. If that suits my mother's name." He didn't mention that his mother had died when he was 12. Shot by border raiders while defending their Tennessee farm. Some stories weren't for telling. The girl, Lena, now relaxed, fractionally. She let him finish tending her wounds, even drank the broth he heated on the stove. But she never spoke, and her eyes never lost that watchful quality. Night fell like a curtain, bringing blessed coolness. Calder made a pallet on the floor, giving Lena the bed. He lay in the dark, listening to her restless breathing, wondering what he'd gotten himself into. In the morning, he'd ride to Cedar Falls, see if anyone was missing a native girl. Maybe there was family looking for her, though the rope marks suggested otherwise. He was drifting toward sleep when the sound came: horses, moving quiet, but not quiet enough. Calder rolled to his feet, grabbing the rifle in one smooth motion. Through the window, he saw them 4 riders circling his property, shadows against shadows. A voice called out, whiskey rough and mean. "Wyatt Calder! Wyatt, we know you're in there!" Calder recognized the voice. Joe Prescott, owner of the biggest spread in the territory, and a man who collected grudges like some men collected gold. "What do you want?" "Prescott," Calder called back, though he suspected he knew. "You got something that don't belong to you. Wyatt, that murdering savage killed Josiah Coltrane, stuck a knife in his belly and left him to bleed out. She's gonna hang proper this time." Calder glanced at Lena. She'd shrunk into the corner, knees drawn up, making herself small. But her eyes, those midnight eyes, blazed with something he recognized. Not guilt, but defiance. the look of someone who'd fought for their life and won. Consequences be damned. Don't know what you're talking about. Calder replied, Been out tracking cattle for 3 days. Haven't seen anyone. Don't lie to me, boy. Prescott's voice rose. We tracked you from Coyote Canyon. You cut her down. And by God, you'll pay for interfering with justice. Justice. Calder almost laughed at the word. He'd seen Prescott's justice before a Mexican vaquero horsewhipped for looking at a white woman. A Chinese launderer burned out for competing with white businesses. Come back in the morning with the sheriff. Calder suggested, We'll sort this out legal. The law's in Cedar Falls, 2 days' ride. That savage could be halfway to Mexico by then. Prescott spat. You got 1 minute to send her out, or we're coming in. Calder weighed his options. 4 men, probably armed, definitely drunk on righteous anger. He had 1 rifle, a pistol, and a defensive position. Not good odds, but he'd faced worse at Chancellorsville. Minute's up, Prescott shouted. The first shot shattered the window, showering glass across the floor. Calder shoved Lena behind the heavy oak chest, then returned fire through the broken pane. The battle for his home and for Lena's life had begun. But that, as they say in the territory, is another chapter of the story. The gunfire lasted only minutes, but it felt like hours, when the thunder of hooves finally faded into the desert night. Calder remained crouched by the window, rifle ready, watching for any sign of Prescott's return. The acrid smell of gunpowder hung in the air like bitter incense. They're gone, he said finally, lowering his weapon. For now. Lena emerged from behind the oak chest, moving careful as a deer stepping into a meadow. Glass crunched under her bare feet, and Calder cursed himself for not thinking of it sooner. Don't move, he commanded, lighting a lamp. The warm glow revealed the damage-shattered window, bullet holes in the adobe walls, his few possessions scattered like autumn leaves. But they were alive, and that counted for something. He fetched his boots from beside the door. Shaking them out of habit, scorpions loved dark places, and handed them to her. They were far too big, but better than bleeding feet. Can't stay here tonight, he said, gathering supplies with practiced efficiency. Prescott will be back with more men. Maybe the law, maybe just a lynch mob. Either way, we need to be gone. Lena watched him pack, those dark eyes following his every move. When he handed her a blanket to wrap around her shoulders, their fingers brushed. She didn't flinch away this time, just nodded her thanks. They rode double on Buttercup through the cool desert darkness, heading for the hidden canyon where Calder sometimes sheltered during sandstorms. It wasn't much a shallow cave carved by wind and ancient water, but it would hide them while he figured out what to do next. By the time they reached the cave, Lena was shivering despite the blanket. Calder built a small fire, careful to keep it deep in the cave where the light wouldn't show. He heated beans and coffee, the simple meal feeling like a feast after the night's excitement. You need to tell me what happened, he said, handing her a tin cup. With Coltrane, I can't help if I don't know the truth. Lena stared into the fire, steam from the coffee rising like spirits around her face. For a long moment, Calder thought she wouldn't answer. Then she spoke, her voice hoarse but clear. He came to our camp 3 days ago. Her English was accented but precise, each word carefully chosen. Said he wanted to trade. My father believed him. She paused, fingers tightening on the cup. Calder waited, patient as stone. My father went to gather the horses. My mother was sick with fever. I was alone when... She stopped, jaw clenching. When he tried to take what wasn't offered. Calder's hands curled into fists, but he kept his voice level. You fought back. His own knife. She met his eyes then, fierce and unashamed. He dropped it when he grabbed me. I picked it up. I warned him. He laughed. So you defended yourself? Yes. The word came out flat. Final. But who believes an Apache girl over a white man's friends? Apache. That explained the fear in town. The quick rush to judgment. The Apache Wars had left scars on both sides, wounds that festered in the desert heat. "What about your family?" Calder asked gently. "Gone." She looked back at the fire. "Soldiers came after Coltrane." My father tried to explain. "They shot him. My mother ran. I heard more shots. Then they took me." The cave fell silent except for the crackle of burning mesquite. Calder thought of his own losses, his mother, his brothers who never came home from the war. The Tennessee farm sold to pay debts. Loss was the common currency of the frontier, spent freely and without mercy. "I'm sorry," he said, knowing how empty the words were. Lena shrugged, a gesture that said everything and nothing. "Why did you help me?" It was Calder's turn to stare at the fire. "My mother used to say that what we do for the least of folks, we do for the Lord himself. Guess some lessons stick, even when faith don't. You risk your life for a stranger's God." "No," he smiled wryly. "I risk it because leaving you there would have made me someone I don't want to be." They slept in shifts, Calder taking first watch. Lena curled near the fire like a cat, the oversized boots still on her feet. In sleep, she looked younger, vulnerable in a way her waking self would never allow. Morning came pale and hesitant, desert dawn painting the rocks in shades of rose and gold. Calder made more coffee, strong enough to float a horseshoe, while Lena washed her face with water from his canteen. "We need supplies," he said, thinking aloud. "Food, ammunition, proper clothes for you. But I can't show my face in Cedar Falls, not with Prescott spreading his poison." "There's a trading post," Lena offered. "North, half-day's ride. The owner trades with the Apache. He might help." It was the longest string of words she'd spoken. Calder nodded, grateful for any option that didn't involve town. They reached the trading post by noon. A ramshackle collection of buildings that looked like a strong wind might blow them to Texas. The owner, a grizzled mountain man named Elijah Thornwood, took one look at them and spat tobacco juice into the dust. "Heard there was trouble down Cedar Falls way," he said, eyes sharp as flint. "You two wouldn't know nothing about that, would you?" "We need supplies," Calder said, neither confirming nor denying. "I can pay." Thornwood studied them for a long moment, then jerked his head toward the store. "Come on then, but if anyone asks, you weren't here." Inside, the post smelled of leather and spices, tobacco and wool. Thornwood's Apache wife, a sturdy woman named Maria, took one look at Lena and bustled her away, muttering in a mix of Spanish and Apache. "She'll get your girl proper fitted," Thornwood said, counting Calder's coins. "Maria's got a soft heart for strays." "She's not my girl," Calder protested. Thornwood's laugh was dry as tumbleweeds. "Sure she ain't. That why you're risking your neck for her." While the women were gone, Calder bought ammunition, dried beef, flour, coffee, the basics of survival. Thornwood threw in an old Henry rifle, its stock scarred but its action smooth. "Might need the extra firepower," he said. "Prescott's been through here already, asking questions. Man's got killing on his mind." "He say anything about the law?" "Sheriff's out of town. Convenient, ain't it?" Thornwood spat again. "But there's a cavalry patrol due through tomorrow. Lieutenant named Roosevelt, educated fellow from back east. He might listen to reason." When Lena emerged, Calder barely recognized her. Maria had dressed her in a simple calico dress, blue as a jay's wing, with sturdy boots and a shawl. Her hair was braided and pinned up, making her look older, almost respectable. "Better," Maria pronounced. "Now she don't look like wild Apache. Maybe ignorant white men leave alone." The ride back to the cave was quiet, both lost in thought. They stopped at Calder's ranch long enough to gather more supplies and check for sign of Prescott's return. The house stood empty, glass still glittering on the floor like deadly diamonds. That night, Calder made a decision. We can't keep running. Eventually, Prescott will catch up. Or we'll run out of places to hide. We need to get you somewhere safe while I deal with this. No, Lena's voice was firm. I won't run anymore. This is my fight. It became mine when I cut you down from that tree. Then we fight together. They argued, quiet but intense, neither giving ground. Finally, Calder threw up his hands, stubborn as a mule. Yes, she almost smiled. My father said the same. Over the next days, they developed a routine. Mornings were for planning, afternoons for preparing. Calder taught Lena to shoot, her steady hands and sharp eyes making her a natural. She taught him to move silent through the desert, to read sign he'd never noticed before. At night, they talked. Small things at first favorite foods, childhood memories, dreams deferred. Calder learned that Lena's full name was Elena Morningstar, that her mother had been Mexican, captured and adopted by the Apache as a child. Lena learned that Calder had wanted to be a teacher before the war, that he still carried a book of poetry in his saddlebags. Why poetry? She asked one night, genuine curiosity in her voice. Reminds me there's beauty in the world, he admitted, even when everything seems ugly. She considered this. Read me some. So he did, voice quiet in the firelight, sharing words written by dead men about love and loss, hope and human failing. Lena listened with the same intensity she brought to everything, absorbing the rhythm and meaning. Your people have strong medicine in words, she said when he finished. All people do, just different words. It was the closest they'd come to acknowledging what was growing between them, this connection forged in crisis, strengthened by shared danger. But both knew that to speak it aloud would make it real, and real things could be lost. On the fourth night, their fragile peace shattered. Calder woke to Buttercup's warning whinny, followed by the sound he'd been dreading, horses approaching their hidden canyon. Up! He hissed, shaking Lena awake. They found us. They grabbed their weapons, took positions at the cave mouth. The moon was new, darkness thick as wool, but Calder could hear them out there, trying to move quiet and failing. Wyatt, Prescott's voice echoed off the canyon walls. Last chance, send out the savage and walk away. Calder jacked around into the Henry, beside him. Lena held his Colt steady in both hands. Together, she whispered. Together, he confirmed. And then the night exploded into chaos once again. The gunfight was brief but vicious. Prescott's men, overconfident in their numbers, hadn't expected return fire from the cave. When the smoke cleared and the echoes died, 2 riders were racing back toward Cedar Falls, leaving their wounded pride and scattered courage in the canyon dust. We can't stay here, Calder said, checking his ammunition. They'll be back with the whole town. But as they prepared to leave, the sound of approaching hooves made them freeze. This time, though, it was different, disciplined, organized, military. Cavalry, Lena breathed. And Calder heard the fear in it. Soldiers meant different things to her people than to his. A voice called out, cultured and precise, despite the Western drawl it was trying to adopt. In the cave, this is Lieutenant Theodore Roosevelt of the 7th Cavalry. Come out with your hands visible. Calder recognized the name from Thornwood's description. The educated Easterner. Maybe their first stroke of luck. We're coming out, Calder called back. Don't shoot. They emerged slowly, hands raised, squinting against the lanterns the soldiers held. Roosevelt sat his horse like he was posing for a portrait, all sharp angles and barely contained energy behind wire spectacles. Mr. Wyatt. I presume... Roosevelt's keen eyes took in their defensive position, the spent shells, Lena's presence. We've had reports of a disturbance. Prescott's doing, Lieutenant, he's trying to lynch this woman without trial. So I've heard. Roosevelt dismounted. An economical movement that spoke of practice. Miss Morningstar, Is it you're accused of killing Josiah Coltrane? Lena lifted her chin, meeting his gaze straight on. I defended myself. Indeed. Roosevelt studied her like she was a fascinating specimen. And you, Mr. Wyatt, your role in this drama? Found her strung up to die at Coyote Canyon. Cut her down. Been keeping her safe since. Admirable, if illegal. Roosevelt removed his spectacles, polishing them with a handkerchief. The law says she should stand trial. The law says a lot of things. Calder replied carefully. Don't always mean justice gets done. Roosevelt's smile was sharp as a cavalry saber. Spoken like a man who's seen the gap between law and justice. Very well. Here's what we'll do. Miss Morningstar will remain in protective custody, yours. Mr. Wyatt, since you've assumed responsibility, the trial will be in 2 weeks when Judge Harper makes his circuit. Until then, any mob justice will answer to the United States Army. Understood. It was more than they could have hoped for. Calder nodded, feeling some of the tension ease from his shoulders. Sergeant McKinley, Roosevelt commanded. Post notice in town. Anyone who attempts vigilante action will face military tribunal. As the cavalry prepared to leave, Roosevelt pulled Calder aside. A word of advice, Mr. Wyatt. Prescott has friends, and the Army can't be everywhere. Watch your back. They returned to Calder's ranch as dawn painted the sky purple and gold. The house felt different now, not quite safe, but at least sanctioned. Calder swept up the broken glass while Lena made coffee, moving around his small kitchen like she'd always been there. 2 weeks, she said, handing him a cup. You think this judge will listen? Harper's fair, mostly. But Prescott will stack the jury with his people. We need to find witnesses, evidence, proof you acted in self-defense. Dead men tell no tales. No, but they leave signs. Where did it happen? Lena's face tightened. South of Black Mesa, near the old mission ruins. Calder knew the place, adobe walls crumbling back to earth, forgotten by all but owls and ghosts. We'll ride out tomorrow, see what we can find. That afternoon, unexpected help arrived. Frank Tucker, Calder's nearest neighbor, rode up leading a pack mule loaded with supplies. Heard you might be having a lean time, the old man said, dismounting stiff as rawhide. His eyes found Lena, catalogued her presence without judgment. Brought what I could spare. Frank, I can't. Sure you can. Tucker spat tobacco juice with remarkable accuracy. Been neighbors 8 years. Calder, you helped me through the drought of '79, least I can do is return the favor. While Calder unloaded supplies, Tucker lowered his voice. Prescott's been talking big in town, saying if the law won't handle it, he will. Man's got maybe 15 riders willing to back his play. Army said they'd prevent that. Tucker snorted. Army's got maybe 6 men and a shave-tail lieutenant who quotes Shakespeare. You do the math. That evening, as they prepared supper together, Lena suddenly spoke. Your friend, he doesn't fear helping you. Frank's good, people. Lost his own son to a mob in Kansas. Accused of horse theft he didn't do. He knows what injustice looks like. She absorbed this, hands careful as she sliced potatoes. You have others who would help. Maybe. The minister's wife, Mrs. Hartley. She's got no love for Prescott. And Doc Brennan tends everyone equal. Doesn't matter their color. But asking them to stand against the town, he shrugged. It's dangerous. Everything worth doing is... That night, for the first time since he'd found her, Lena smiled, really smiled. Not just the ghost of one. It transformed her face, made her look young and alive instead of hunted. What? Calder asked, puzzled by her amusement. You sound like my father. He said the same when he courted my mother. Her family forbade it, Mexican girl with Apache man. But he persisted. Did it work out? The smile dimmed but didn't disappear. 20 years together, not perfect, but good, real. They sat on the porch as darkness fell, watching stars emerge like scattered diamonds. The desert sang its night song, coyotes calling, owls hunting, wind whispering secrets to the sage. "I know a place," Lena said suddenly, "where Coltrane camped before he came to us. He might have left things there. Proof he meant harm." "Worth a look. Where?" She described a box canyon 2 hours north, marked by petroglyphs her people had carved generations ago. Calder knew it good water, shelter from wind, the kind of place a man might camp before doing evil. The next morning they rode out early, taking both horses in case they needed to run. The day was cooler, clouds building over the mountains promising rain. The desert waited for it like a prayer, dry earth ready to bloom at water's touch. They found Coltrane's camp just as Lena described cold fire ring, empty bottles, scattered trash. But it was what Calder found buried in the sand that made his blood run cold. Rope, the same kind used to hang Lena, and something else, a leather journal, water-stained but readable. "Listen to this," Calder said, reading aloud. "Saw Apache camp near Black Mesa. Old man, sick woman, pretty young thing, easy pickings." The entries went on, detailing Coltrane's plans in language that made Calder's stomach turn. Clear evidence of premeditation, of evil intent. "This changes everything," he said. "No jury could ignore this." But Lena wasn't listening. She stood frozen, staring at the canyon wall where someone had carved fresh marks in the stone. A message, crude but clear. "Apache witch will burn." "We need to go," she said, voice tight. "Now." Calder didn't argue. They mounted quick, the journal safe in his saddlebags. But they'd barely made it out of the canyon when riders appeared, not Prescott's rabble, but Apache warriors, faces painted for war. Lena spoke rapid Apache, hands moving in signs Calder couldn't follow. The lead warrior, scarred and weathered as old leather, responded harsh and final. "What's happening?" Calder asked, hand careful near his gun. "My father's brother," Lena explained, never taking her eyes off the warriors. "He says I've brought shame to the people, that I should have died rather than kill a white man, bring trouble to the tribe." "That's the way it is." Her voice was steady, but Calder saw her hands tremble. "He gives us one chance to leave, never return." The warriors watched, still as carved stone, as Calder and Lena rode away. Only when they were specks on the horizon did the Apache turn back to whatever grim business had brought them out. "I'm sorry," Calder said when they finally stopped to rest the horses. "For what I knew when I picked up that knife, I was choosing exile. Some prices we pay knowing the cost." They made camp that night in a grove of cottonwoods, the same type of tree where Calder had found her. But now the branches sheltered rather than threatened, leaves whispering comfort in the evening breeze. "Tell me about before," Calder said as they shared their simple meal. "Before all this." So she did, painting pictures with words of a childhood between worlds, Mexican festivals and Apache ceremonies, her mother's songs and her father's stories, a life rich in culture but always on the edge, never fully accepted by either people. "And you?" she asked when her stories ran dry. "What was your before?" Calder spoke of Tennessee mountains and morning mist, of learning letters from his mother and tracking from his father, of boys who marched off to war singing and came back silent, when they came back at all. "We're both orphans," Lena observed, "cut loose from our roots. Maybe that's why we recognize each other." The words hung between them, weighted with meaning neither was ready to acknowledge. But when Lena shivered in the cooling air, Calder draped his coat around her shoulders, and when he did, she didn't pull away. They had 10 days until the trial, 10 days to build a defense and maybe, just maybe, find justice in a land that rarely offered it, but sitting there in the cottonwood grove, sharing warmth against the desert night. They had something else too, something that didn't have a name yet, but grew stronger with each passing hour. The future remained uncertain as desert rain, but for now, they had this companionship forged in crisis, understanding born of loss, and the faint but persistent hope that two broken people might make something whole. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Prescott was still out there, plotting. The town still wanted blood. The law still favored those with white skin and full pockets. But tonight, they had each other, and in the unforgiving desert, sometimes that was miracle enough. The storm came that night, desert rain falling like redemption on parched earth. Calder and Lena huddled in the ranch house, listening to water drum against the roof. In the morning, the world smelled new creosote and sage releasing their perfume to the sky. Over breakfast, Lena did something unexpected. She took a stick of charred wood from the cold fireplace and began drawing on the floor. Not random marks, but deliberate images a story told in pictures. "What are you doing?" Calder asked, fascinated. "Showing truth," she replied, continuing her work, since words aren't believed from Apache mouths. The drawings took shape: a man approaching a camp, a woman sick in her shelter, an older man leaving with horses, then violence, crude but unmistakable, a struggle, a knife, a figure falling. "This is what happened," Lena said, sitting back on her heels. "Maybe pictures speak louder than my voice." Calder studied the images, understanding dawning. "We could have the minister's wife copy these proper, on paper. Mrs. Hartley does portraits sometimes, if she made clean versions." Would they listen? Worth trying. Visual testimony might carry weight, words don't. They spent the morning perfecting the sequence, Lena adding details that made the truth clearer. By noon, they had a complete narrative in ash and memory. The ride to town was tense. Calder kept his rifle across his saddle, eyes scanning for trouble. But Cedar Falls drowsed in the afternoon heat. Only dogs and chickens moving in the dusty streets. "Mrs. Hartley answered her door with flour in her hair and suspicion in her eyes. But when she saw Lena, her expression softened. "Mr. Wyatt," she said carefully, "I heard you had a guest." "Ma'am, we need your help." Calder explained about the drawings, the trial, their hope for justice. The minister's wife listened, hands twisting her apron. "Joseph wouldn't approve. He says we shouldn't involve ourselves in civil matters." "Since when is justice not a moral matter?" Calder challenged gently. She looked at Lena then, really looked. Two women measuring each other across the divide of culture and circumstance. Whatever Mrs. Hartley saw in those dark eyes made her decision. "Come in," she said, "quickly, before someone sees." Inside, while Mrs. Hartley worked to reproduce Lena's drawings with proper ink and paper, she talked. "I had a sister once, younger, pretty. A traveling man took advantage of her trust, left her ruined and with child. She took her own life rather than face the shame. Her hand never paused in its careful work. The man went on to the next town, the next innocent girl, because that's how it is. Some people matter and some don't. When she finished, she had created 6 panels that told the story clear as any testimony. She wrapped them in oilcloth, protective against rain and prying eyes. "Be careful," she warned as they prepared to leave. "Prescott's been meeting with Judge Harper's nephew. They play cards together regular now." The news sat heavy as they rode home. If Prescott was influencing the judge through family connections, their fight just got harder. That evening, Frank Tucker visited again, bringing news that made Calder's blood chill. Prescott hired himself a lawyer. Frank reported, "Fellow named Garrison out of Santa Fe. Slick as oil and twice as dirty. Man could convince a jury that water runs uphill if the price was right." "We need our own lawyer," Calder realized. "But I don't have the money for anyone good enough to match Garrison." "What about that young fellow works at the bank?" Frank suggested. "Samuel Henshaw, just past the bar, eager to make a name. He any good?" "Green as spring grass, but honest. And his mother was Mexican. Might be more sympathetic than most. It was thin hope, but better than none. Calder resolved to visit Henshaw in the morning. That night, unable to sleep, he found Lena sitting on the porch, wrapped in a blanket against the desert chill. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked, settling beside her. "Listening," she said simply. "The desert talks at night, tells you things if you know how to hear." "What's it saying now?" She was quiet so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, that storms come before new growth, that some seeds need fire to bloom. Speaking in riddles now. "No." She turned to look at him. Starlight caught in her eyes. "Speaking truth, this trouble, this pain, maybe it's burning away old things, making room for new." Calder felt something shift in his chest, tectonic and irreversible. "Lena." But she placed a finger against his lips, gentle as moth wings. "Not yet. After, when we know if there is an after." He caught her hand, held it. "There will be." "You promise what you can't control." "I promise I'll fight for it. That enough?" She squeezed his fingers once before pulling away. "More than anyone's offered before." The next days blurred together in a haze of preparation. Samuel Henshaw, young and earnest behind spectacles that kept sliding down his nose, agreed to take the case. He listened to Lena's story, studied the journal, examined Mrs. Hartley's drawings with the intensity of a scholar. "It's compelling," he admitted. "But Garrison will argue she could have run, could have called for help. We need to establish that lethal force was her only option." They worked on her testimony. Henshaw coaching Lena on how to present herself to a jury that would be predisposed against her. Speak clearly but not defiantly. Show emotion but not too much. Be human enough to evoke sympathy but not so human as to threaten their worldview. "I hate this," Lena said after a particularly frustrating session. "Pretending to be less than I am so they might see me as more than nothing." "It's a game," Calder told her. "Stupid and unfair, but one we have to play to win." 3 days before the trial, Doc Brennan made an unexpected visit. The elderly physician dismounted careful as crystal, medical bag in hand. "Heard you might need an expert witness," he said without preamble. "About the nature of injuries, defensive wounds, that sort of thing." "Doc," Calder started, grateful but worried. "This could cost you patience, standing up for "For what's right," Brennan interrupted. "Son, I've been doctoring in this territory for 30 years. Seen every kind of violence men do to each other and to women. About time I spoke up about it." He examined Lena with professional detachment, cataloging the healing bruises, the defensive marks on her hands, the pattern of injuries that told their own story. "Clear case of self-defense," he pronounced. "I'll testify to that, and Garrison can go hang himself if he doesn't like it." But the next morning brought trouble in the form of smoke rising from the Tucker Ranch. Calder and Lena rode hard toward it, fearing the worst. They found Frank standing in his yard, watching his barn burn. The old man's face was stone, but his hands shook with rage. "Prescott?" Calder asked, though he knew the answer. "Note said this was a warning. Said worse would come if I testified." Frank spat into the flames. "Like I care about threats from yellow-bellied cowards who burn barns in the night." They fought the fire best they could, but the barn was lost. As they picked through the ashes, Lena worked alongside the men, hauling water and beating at embers. Frank watched her with new respect. "Girl's got sand," he told Calder. "Worth fighting for." "Yes," Calder agreed simply. "She is." That night, Lena found him cleaning his guns, preparing for whatever violence might come. She sat across from him, picked up the Colt, began cleaning it with the same careful attention he showed. "Teaching you to shoot was maybe a mistake," he said, watching her competent hands. "Why?" "Makes it harder to keep you safe if you insist on fighting too." She looked up at him, fierce and beautiful in the lamplight. "I never asked you to keep me safe, just to stand beside me." "That I can do." They worked in companionable silence. preparing for battle with oil and cloth and determination. Outside, the desert wind whispered warnings, but inside, they had carved out a space of peace. The trial was in 2 days. Prescott was escalating his intimidation. The town was choosing sides, and in the middle of it all, 2 people who should never have met were finding something worth the fight. "Whatever happens," Lena said as they finished their work, "I want you to know meeting you was worth it, even if—" "No ifs," Calder interrupted. "We're going to win this. You're going to be free. And then—" He met her eyes, let her see everything he'd been holding back. "Then we decide what comes next, together." She nodded, solemn as an oath. Together. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, they had truth on their side, friends willing to stand with them, and a bond forged in fire that no amount of prejudice could break. The seeds were planted. Now they just had to survive long enough to see what bloomed. The night before the trial, neither Calder nor Lena slept. They sat on the porch, watching stars wheel across the desert sky, each lost in thoughts too heavy for words. At midnight, the quiet shattered. Hoofbeats thundered toward the ranch, not 1 or 2 riders, but many. Calder grabbed his rifle, pushing Lena toward the house. "Inside, now!" But she stood firm, her own weapon ready. "Together, remember." There was no time to argue. The riders swept into the yard like a dark tide, torches blazing against the night. Joe Prescott led them, his face twisted with righteous fury. "Last chance. Wyatt," he bellowed. "Send her out, or we burn you out." Calder counted 15 men, maybe 20, too many. His mind raced, calculating angles, ammunition, slim chances. "The trial's tomorrow," he called back. "Let the law." "The law's been bought and sold," Prescott spat. "But hemp rope don't care about lawyers and lies. Boys, torch the place." 2 riders spurred forward, torches raised. Calder fired, knocking one torch spinning into the darkness. Lena's shot sent the second rider's horse dancing sideways. Spooked. Then chaos erupted. Gunfire split the night, muzzle flashes like deadly fireflies. Calder and Lena retreated to the house, firing through windows as Prescott's men circled like wolves. Glass shattered, wood splintered, the air filled with smoke and curses. "The roof!" Lena shouted. Fire licked at the wooden shingles where a torch had landed. Calder cursed, knowing they'd have to choose fight the fire or fight the men. Either way, they'd lose. Then, impossible, but real. More gunfire erupted but not aimed at them. Riders charged from the darkness, scattering Prescott's mob. Calder saw Frank Tucker's grizzled form, Samuel Henshaw awkward on horseback but firing gamely, and surprising everyone, Lieutenant Roosevelt leading a cavalry charge. "Disperse immediately," Roosevelt's voice carried battlefield authority. "By order of the United States Army." Prescott's men, caught between the house and charging cavalry, broke like quail before a hawk. They fled into the desert, leaving wounded pride and scattered torches behind. "The fire!" Frank shouted, already organizing a bucket brigade. They fought flames with the same desperation they'd fought men. Lena worked beside soldiers who hours ago might have arrested her, passing buckets in a human chain. When the last ember died, the house stood damaged but whole. Roosevelt surveyed the scene, spectacles glinting in the dying firelight. "Mr. Prescott will answer for this. Attempted murder, arson, conspiracy. He's given me ample cause for arrest." "You came just in time," Calder said, exhausted and grateful. "How did you know?" "Your friend Mr. Tucker raised the alarm, said he saw riders gathering." Roosevelt's smile was sharp. "I may quote Shakespeare, as he kindly noted, but I also know tactics. Prescott's mistake was thinking education makes a man soft." As dawn broke, they assessed the damage. Bullet holes, scorched walls, shattered windows, but they were alive. Prescott sat in irons with 3 of his men, The rest scattered to the wind. "This changes things for the trial," Henshaw said, adjusting his eternally sliding spectacles. "Hard to argue against self-defense when the whole town saw Prescott try to lynch her." Doc Brennan, who'd ridden with the rescue party, tended minor wounds with steady hands. "Girl showed more courage than most men I've known," he declared loudly. Ensuring the soldiers heard, "Any jury convicts her. They're bigger fools than I thought." The trial convened at noon in Cedar Falls' makeshift courthouse, a converted barn that still smelled of hay and horses. Judge Harper, thin and stern as a fence post, surveyed the packed room with displeasure. "This is a court of law," he announced. "Not a circus. Anyone disrupts proceedings will be removed." Garrison, Prescott's lawyer, looked less confident without his patron present. He presented the prosecution's case with diminished fire, painting Lena as a dangerous woman who used violence when negotiation would have sufficed. Then Henshaw rose, young voice gaining strength with each word. He presented Coltrane's journal, the drawings, Doc Brennan's testimony about defensive wounds, but most powerful was Lena herself. She took the stand with quiet dignity, speaking truth without embellishment. Her voice never wavered as she described Coltrane's attack, her desperate defense, the loss of her family. "I did not want to kill," she said, meeting each juror's eyes, "but I wanted to live. Is that not the right of every person?" Garrison tried to shake her, suggesting she'd led Coltrane on, that she could have escaped. But Lena's calm responses and the evidence of premeditation in Coltrane's own hand undermined every argument. When Calder testified about finding her hung up to die, about Prescott's repeated attacks, the mood in the courthouse shifted. Even skeptical faces showed doubt about the narrative they'd been fed. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. When they returned, the foreman, a German immigrant named Muller, who knew something about prejudice, stood straight. "We find the defendant not guilty by reason of self-defense." The courthouse erupted, cheers from some, angry shouts from others. Judge Harper hammered his gavel, threatening contempt charges, but his eyes showed relief. Justice, however reluctant, had been done. Outside, as they pushed through the crowd, Calder kept Lena close. Some faces showed hatred still, but others, more than expected, showed grudging respect. "It's not over," Roosevelt warned quietly. "Prescott has friends. You might consider relocating." "This is my home," Calder replied firmly. "We're not running." But later, at the ranch, as they surveyed the damage by daylight, he wondered if stubbornness was wisdom or folly. "You could have a life without this," Lena said softly. "Without bullet holes and burned walls. Without people who hate you for helping me." Calder turned to her. Saw the offer in her eyes she would leave. Free him from the consequences of compassion. "You remember what you said about seeds needing fire?" She nodded. "Maybe we both needed this fire, to burn away what we were, make room for what we could be." "And what's that?" Instead of words, he answered with action, drew her close, kissed her with all the feelings that had grown in darkness and danger. She returned it fierce and sweet, 2 souls recognizing home in each other. When they broke apart, breathless, the future seemed less important than the present. "Stay," he said simply. "Yes," she replied. That evening, unexpected visitors arrived. Maria Thornwood, the trading post owner's Apache wife, led 3 women from her tribe. They dismounted wary but determined. "We heard," Maria said simply, "about the trial, about the white woman who drew the truth." She nodded to Mrs. Hartley, who'd risked much to help, and the men who stood for justice. The women had brought gifts, beaded leather, woven blankets, dried foods, traditional offerings for a new household, a new beginning. "Not all Apache cast you out," Maria told Lena in their language. "Some remember your mother's kindness, your father's honor. You have family still, if you want it." Lena's eyes filled with tears, the first Calder had seen her shed. She embraced each woman, words flowing in Apache too quick for him to catch even the little he'd learned. As the women prepared to leave, Maria pulled Calder aside. "You know what you risk. White man taking Apache woman as yours." "I know what I gain," Calder replied. "That's what matters." Maria studied him, then nodded. "You'll do." That night, as they worked to repair the house, other neighbors came. Not many, but enough. The minister's wife brought curtains for the broken windows. The schoolteacher offered books. Even the blacksmith, taciturn and neutral through the whole affair, left a box of nails and new hinges. "Building something new," Frank Tucker observed, helping to patch bullet holes. "Not just walls. Community, maybe. Different than before." It was tentative, fragile as desert rain, but it was a start. As the stars emerged, Calder and Lena stood in their damaged but standing home. Tomorrow would bring challenges Prescott's trial, rebuilding, forging a life together in a world that would always view them askance. But tonight, they had survived. More than survived, they had won a victory for truth over prejudice, love over hate. "No more sleeping on the floor," Lena declared, practical even in triumph. "Tomorrow, we fix the bed." Calder laughed, the sound foreign after so much tension. "Demanding woman." "Yes," she agreed, smiling. "You're a demanding woman." And in those words, simple and sure, lay the promise of all their tomorrows. The house stood quiet in the aftermath of battle, walls scarred but solid. Like the two people within, they worked in silence through the afternoon, cleaning glass, patching holes, setting their small world right again. When evening came, exhaustion weighed heavy as desert stone. Calder built a fire in the hearth, though the night was warm. Something about flames controlled, after seeing them wild and destructive. Lena sat close, knees drawn up, watching the dance of light and shadow. "We survived," she said quietly, as if testing the truth of it. "We did more than that." Calder settled beside her, close enough to feel her warmth. "We won." "The trial, yes, but winning." She turned to look at him, eyes deep as midnight. "That's just the beginning, isn't it?" He knew what she meant. The verdict had granted her legal freedom, but social acceptance was another mountain entirely. They'd face stares, whispers, closed doors. Some would always see her as savage, him as traitor to his race. "I've been alone a long time," Calder said slowly. "By choice, mostly, after the war. Easier than trying to fit into a world that didn't make sense anymore." He took her hand, marveled at how right it felt in his. "But these past weeks, fighting beside you, I remembered what it felt like to have something worth protecting." Lena's fingers tightened on his. "In my culture, warriors who save each other in battle are bonded. Blood doesn't make it, but choice does." She hesitated, then continued softer. "You chose me when everyone said let me hang. Why? Because I looked at you and saw a person, not a color or a tribe. Saw someone fighting to live." He touched her face gently, thumb tracing the line of her jaw. "And maybe because I recognized something in you, that loneliness, that strength despite it." She leaned into his touch, eyes closing briefly. When she opened them, decision shone there clear as stars. "Calder," she whispered, and his name on her lips was prayer and promise both. The space between them dissolved. Her hands found his shoulders, his tangled in her hair. The kiss was different from their first, no desperation now, no stolen moment between dangers. This was choice, deliberate and sure. When they broke apart, breathing unsteady, Lena's usual composure cracked. I don't know." "Shh." Calder pressed his forehead to hers, gentling his voice like he would for a spooked horse. "There's no hurry, no expectations. We have time now?" "Do we?" The vulnerability in her voice near broke him. Or will someone else come? Another Prescott, another mob. Then we'll face them together. He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. But tonight, there's just us. Let the world wait outside. She searched his face, finding what she needed. Her next kiss was bolder, hands sliding under his shirt to find skin and scars. He groaned soft against her mouth, desire and tenderness warring for dominance. "Lena," he managed, voice rough. "Are you sure?" Instead of answering with words, she stood, taking his hand, led him to the bedroom where afternoon light slanted golden through patched walls. The bed they'd repaired together stood waiting, simple but solid. She turned to face him, chin lifted in that way he'd come to love. "All my life, things were taken from me. Choice, freedom, family." Her hands moved to the buttons of her dress, steady despite the flush on her cheeks. "This, I choose. You, I choose." Calder's breath caught. She was beautiful in her determination, fierce and soft at once. He crossed to her, stilled her hands with his own. "Then let me," he murmured. "Let me show you how precious you are." What followed was slow as honey, sweet as desert rain. He worshipped her with touch and whispered words, showing with his body what he'd only begun to say with a voice. She responded with equal fervor, teaching him without words that strength and tenderness could exist in the same breath. When she trembled beneath him, when she gasped his name like salvation, when she whispered, "Go deeper, don't hold back," it wasn't just physical joining she meant. It was soul-deep connection, two isolated people choosing to be alone no more. After, they lay entwined, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. The room smelled of love and lavender from the soap she used, mixed with leather and gunpowder that always clung to him. "My mother told me once," Lena said quietly, "that when you find where you belong, your spirit knows, like a bird finding its nest after a long flight." "And do you?" Calder asked. "Feel like you belong?" She raised up on an elbow, looking down at him with eyes soft as he'd ever seen them. "Here, with you, yes. For the first time since they died, yes." He pulled her down for a kiss, tasting salt and sweet and home. They dozed as darkness fell, wrapped in each other and worn quilts. But near midnight, both woke to sound outside, not horses this time, but footsteps, careful and trying for quiet. Calder reached for his gun, but Lena caught his wrist. "Wait, listen." The footsteps circled the house once, then stopped at the porch. A soft knock came, tentative. "Calder Wyatt," a woman's voice, young and scared. "Please, I need help." They dressed quickly, Calder checking the rifle while Lena peered through the window. "I see her," Lena whispered. "Young, Mexican maybe, alone." Calder opened the door cautious, gun ready but not aimed. A girl stood there, maybe 16, belly round with child beneath her threadbare dress. "Please," she said again, swaying on her feet. In town they said you help people others won't." Lena moved past Calder, catching the girl as she collapsed. Together they brought her inside, settling her in the chair by the dying fire. "What's your name?" Lena asked gentle, bringing water. Rosa Delgado," the girl sipped gratefully. "I walked from Millerton, 2 days." "Child, that's 20 miles, Calder said. "In your condition." "Had no choice." Rosa's hand curved protective over her belly. "My family cast me out. The father, he's white, married, won't acknowledge." She broke off, tears streaming. "They were going to send me to the sisters, take the baby when it comes. I ran." Lena and Calder exchanged looks. They both knew the institutions she meant, where unwed mothers were hidden away, their children given to proper families. "You can stay," Lena said firmly. "Rest tonight. Tomorrow we'll figure out what comes next." But I have nothing. No money. No. You have need. Calder interrupted. That's enough. They made her comfortable in the small second room, Lena fussing with blankets and pillows. When Rosa finally slept, they returned to their own bed, lying close in the darkness. We barely have enough for ourselves, Calder said quietly, adding another mouth, a baby coming. I know. Lena's voice was steady. But didn't you save me when logic said, don't, sometimes the heart knows better than the head? He pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair. When did you become the wise one? When you showed me kindness could exist without conditions. She kissed his chest, right over his heart. We'll manage. We always do. Morning brought new challenges. Rosa, rested but still fragile, tried to help with chores despite their protests. She was a hard worker, eager to earn her keep. I can cook, she offered. And so, my mother taught me before. The sentence trailed off into painful memory. Then you'll be valuable help, Lena said practically. This one burns everything but coffee and beans. Hey now, Calder protested, but he was smiling. The sound of women's laughter in his house was worth any teasing. Frank Tucker arrived mid-morning with supplies and gossip. Prescott's trial is next week, he reported. Word is he's trying to claim temporary madness, grief over his friend Coltrane. He spat tobacco juice with derision. Also heard tell there's a girl gone missing from Millerton. Father's offering reward for her return. Rosa went pale, hand flying to her belly. Haven't seen any missing girls, Calder said evenly. Just family here. Frank's eyes took in Rosa, understanding dawning. No, don't reckon you have. Family's what you make it, after all. That afternoon, while the women worked on expanding the garden, Calder rode to town for supplies. The stares were less hostile now, more curious. Some even nodded greeting. At the general store, Mrs. Patterson actually smiled. Heard you took in that Mexican girl. Christian thing to do. Just the right thing, Calder corrected, uncomfortable with praise. Same difference, isn't it? She added an extra measure of coffee to his order. For your household. It was acceptance, grudging and qualified, but real. He returned to find Lena teaching Rosa Apache words while they worked. The two women had bonded quick, sisters in survival. Seeing them together, hearing their mixed languages and shared laughter, Calder felt something ease in his chest. This was family, chosen, complicated but true. That night, as they lay together after love, Lena traced the scars on his chest. Each had a story war, work, violence survived. We're all broken, she murmured. You, me, Rosa. But broken things can be mended stronger, if the joining's done right. Is that what we are? Calder caught her hand, kissed each finger. Mended. Mending, she corrected. Every day, every choice to stand together instead of alone. It's not finished work. Good, he said, pulling her close. I don't want it finished. Want to keep building this with you, whatever shape it takes. Outside, coyotes sang to the rising moon. Inside, 3 broken people sheltered together, making something new from the pieces of their pasts. It wasn't conventional, wasn't easy, wasn't what any of them had planned. But it was theirs, and it was enough. Dawn came with news that changed everything. Frank Tucker rode hard into the yard, his usual calm shattered. Prescott's escaped, he said without preamble. Killed a guard, took horses and supplies. Word is he's gathering men from across the territory, offering gold for Apache scalps and higher bounty for anyone who helps the Apache. Calder felt Lena tense beside him, her hand finding his. Rosa, heavy with child now after 2 weeks in their care, gripped the porch rail. How many men? Calder asked, already calculating defenses. Could be dozens by week's end. He's calling it a crusade. Says the law failed, so citizens must act. Frank spat in disgust. Using God's name to justify murder. We should leave, Lena said quietly. All of us. Head for Mexico before... No. Calder's voice was firm. Running makes us look guilty. Besides, Rosa can't travel far in her condition. Then what? Frank asked. You can't fight an army. Calder looked at the small ranch he'd built, the women who'd become his family, everything he'd found after years of emptiness. Now threatened again. We prepare, he said, and we get help. Lieutenant Roosevelt arrived that afternoon, dust-covered and grim. I've been relieved of command, he announced. Apparently, preventing lynchings isn't popular with certain territorial officials. My replacement arrives next week, a man more sympathetic to Prescott's views. So we're alone, Lena stated. Not entirely. I've sent word to Fort Union. If Prescott moves against citizens, it's federal jurisdiction. But help is days away. Roosevelt adjusted his spectacles. A gesture Calder had learned meant he was thinking hard. You need allies. The town split used that. That evening, unexpected visitors arrived. Mrs. Hartley led them the minister's wife, Doc Brennan, Samuel Henshaw, and surprisingly, several Mexican families from the poor section of town. We've been talking, Mrs. Hartley said. What Prescott represents. It's not just about you anymore. It's about what kind of place this will be. Mi hermana, one of the Mexican women said, nodding to Rosa. We know her story. Could be any of our daughters. Doc Brennan cleared his throat. I've lived here 30 years, stayed neutral in most troubles, but a man comes to a point where neutral means complicit. I'm done being complicit. They talked through the night, planning. The Mexican families would shelter Rosa if fighting came. Doc Brennan would speak to other longtime residents, Mrs. Hartley would rally the church women, nothing fiercer than Christian ladies defending what's right, she declared. As dawn approached, Calder found himself alone with Roosevelt on the porch. You're an interesting man, Wyatt, the lieutenant observed. You could have kept your head down, lived quiet. Tried that after the war. Turns out quiet can be its own kind of death. And the woman worth all this? Calder watched Lena through the window, saw her teaching Rosa to load a rifle while Mrs. Hartley took notes for another broadside. Strong and gentle, fierce and kind, everything he hadn't known he was looking for. Worth everything, he said simply. The next days blurred together. By day, they fortified the ranch, Roosevelt's military knowledge proving invaluable. By night, allies slipped in with information, supplies, promises of support. The town was indeed splitting. Prescott's rhetoric attracted those who'd always resented change, feared difference, but others remembered kindnesses Lena helping during the fever outbreak, Calder's fair dealings, Rosa's situation hitting too close to home. 3 nights before Prescott's expected attack, Maria Thornwood arrived with a dozen Apache warriors. My husband's at the trading post with rifles, she told Lena. These men remember your father. They've come to stand with his daughter. The warriors made camp in the canyon behind the ranch. Their presence was complicated. It could inflame tensions, prove Prescott's warnings about race war, but it also meant trained fighters, people who knew desert warfare like breathing. It's risk, Lena said that night, pressed against Calder in their bed. Everything's risk now. At least we're not alone. She was quiet long enough he thought she'd fallen asleep. Then, I'm afraid, not of dying, of losing this us Rosa, the hope we've built. He held her tighter. Then we fight harder. Fear's just another word for having something worth protecting. The morning Rosa went into labor. Scouts reported Prescott's force approaching 40 men, maybe 50. They'd arrive by nightfall. Perfect timing, Doc Brennan muttered. Sleeves rolled up. Baby's coming whether we're ready or not. They moved Rosa to the most protected room, Lena and Mrs. Hartley attending while the men prepared defenses. Her cries pierced the air as contractions grew stronger. First babies take time. Doc said, could be hours yet. They didn't have hours. As the sun peaked, dust clouds showed Prescott's approach. Calder positioned defenders Apache warriors in the rocks, townsmen behind fortifications, women armed and ready as last defense. Remember, Roosevelt called out, we hold until federal troops arrive. This isn't about winning, it's about surviving. Prescott's force stopped just out of rifle range. The man himself rode forward under a white flag, though Calder trusted it as much as a rattlesnake's rattle. Last chance. Wyatt, Prescott called. Send out the savages and race traitors. This is white man's land. This is America, Calder replied. Land of anyone willing to work it honest. Pretty words won't stop bullets. You've got 1 hour to reconsider. As Prescott retreated, Rosa's scream split the air. The baby was coming. Push, mija, Mrs., Hartley encouraged. Your baby wants to meet this world. The hour passed like heartbeats, too fast and too slow. When Prescott's men charged, the desert exploded into chaos. Rifles cracked from dozens of positions. Apache arrows found gaps in cover. The Mexican men fought with desperate fury, defending more than just one ranch. This was about their place in the territory, their children's futures. Calder fired steady, picking targets. Beside him, Lena worked with deadly grace. No hesitation now. They'd moved past the time for mercy. The first assault broke against their defenses, Prescott's men retreating with casualties. But they regrouped, came again and again. Between waves, Rosa's cries grew more urgent. Almost there, Doc Brennan called. I can see the head. The third assault was the worst. Prescott's men had found the high ground, pouring fire into the yard. 2 Apache warriors fell. Samuel Henshaw took a bullet in the shoulder but kept shooting with his other hand. Then, just as ammunition ran low and hope dimmed, Rosa's baby cried healthy and strong and absolutely unaware of the violence surrounding its birth. It's a girl, Mrs., Hartley announced triumphantly. And from the eastern horizon came Salvation, a dust cloud marking cavalry approach, the federal troops Roosevelt had summoned. Prescott's men saw it too. Their assault faltered, then broke entirely as uniformed soldiers swept into view. Within minutes, the attackers scattered like chaff, Prescott himself racing for the Mexican border. The aftermath was surreal. Federal soldiers securing prisoners while Rosa nursed her daughter. Apache warriors sharing water with townsmen who'd fought beside them. Doc Brennan moving between wounded, treating all alike. What will you name her? Lena asked Rosa, touching the baby's tiny fist with wonder. Esperanza, Rosa said. Hope, born in battle but alive, like all of us. That evening, as soldiers made camp and allies said farewells, Calder and Lena walked to the hill overlooking their ranch. Smoke damage marked walls. Bullet scars showed fresh, but it stood. We did it, Lena said, leaning into him. We survived, he corrected. Now comes the harder part, living with what we've won. She turned in his arms, hands framing his face. I know, there'll be other Prescotts, other fights, but today, we chose the world we want. That matters. He kissed her there on the hilltop, tasting courage and gunpowder, love and possibility. Below them, their strange family gathered Rosa singing to Esperanza, Roosevelt arguing philosophy with Apache warriors, Mrs. Hartley organizing care for wounded enemies and allies alike. What now? Lena asked when they broke apart. Now we go home, help with dinner, plan for tomorrow. He smiled, the expression feeling strange after so much grimness. Maybe add another room to the house, getting crowded. I'd like that. A bigger house, maybe. She hesitated, then forged ahead. Maybe children of our own someday. Brothers and sisters for Esperanza. The future she painted stole his breath, not just survival, but life. Full and rich. Children who'd grow up seeing all people as people, who'd know that family was about choice, not blood. "I'd like that too," he managed. They walked back hand in hand as stars emerged. The war for their corner of the world wasn't over, might never be truly over. But they'd won this battle, carved out space for their unlikely family. Tomorrow would bring challenges. Prescott might return. The town would have to heal its divisions. Rosa would need protection from those who'd drag her back to shame. But tonight, they had each other. They had allies who'd bled for justice. They had a baby's cry proclaiming new life in defiance of death. Sometimes, Calder thought as Lena smiled at something Rosa said. Sometimes that's how the world changes, not in grand gestures but small stands. Not in perfect victories, but stubborn survival. Not in purity, but in the messy, complicated choice to see humanity in unexpected faces. The desert wind sang through bullet holes in the walls, a strange music of endurance. They were home, the morning after the battle. Federal troops still patrolled Cedar Falls, but Calder knew their protection was temporary. He stood with Lena on their porch, watching Rosa cradle baby Esperanza while the sun painted the desert gold. "We can't stay," he said quietly. "Prescott has friends, influence. When the soldiers leave—" "I know." Lena's hand found his. "But where this is your land, your home. Home is where you are, where our family is." He squeezed her fingers. "The land's just dirt without that." Roosevelt approached from the yard, uniform dusty but bearing intact. "The colonel's given Prescott's men 3 days to surrender or be hunted as outlaws. After that, we move on." He paused, studying them. "You've thought about leaving. Thinking and doing are different beasts." Calder replied, "Perhaps not as different as you believe. There's talk of new settlements forming in southern Colorado. Good land, fresh starts. The government's encouraging mixed communities, Indian, Mexican, Anglo together." Roosevelt's smile was knowing. "They need experienced ranchers and teachers, if you're interested in that old dream." That afternoon, Frank Tucker arrived with unexpected news. "Old Thornwood at the trading post is looking to retire. Wants someone to take over the business, someone who understands all kinds of folk." He looked meaningfully at Lena. "Could be opportunity." While they deliberated, Doc Brennan examined Rosa and the baby. "Both healthy," he announced. "But the girl needs proper papers, documentation. Can't have her living in shadows." "I'll handle that." Henshaw volunteered, arm still in a sling but eyes bright with purpose. "Birth certificate, proper records, by law. She's an American citizen, born on American soil." The young lawyer had found his calling in the fight, discovering that justice sometimes required more than books and precedent. That evening, Calder gathered their strange family. "We have choices to make: stay and fight forever, or find somewhere new to build." "The trading post sounds promising," Lena said. "Bridge between worlds, like us." "But it's still here," Rosa pointed out. "Where people know our story, judge us." Maria Thornwood, who'd stayed after the battle, spoke up. "Not all judgment is bad. Some see you as symbols, now proof that different peoples can stand together." They talked long into the night, weighing options. Finally, Calder made a proposal that surprised everyone, including himself. "What if we did both take the trading post, but expand it, make it a way station for people like us mixed families, those seeking fresh starts? Use the profit to buy land in Colorado, build something larger. A network," Roosevelt said approvingly. "Safe places for those who don't fit neat categories." "It's ambitious," Lena said, but her eyes shone with possibility. "So was cutting you down from that tree." Calder replied, "Best decision I ever made." The next weeks blurred with activity. They negotiated with Thornwood, who practically gave them the trading post once he understood their vision. The federal troops helped transport their belonging, Roosevelt pulling strings to ensure safe passage. On their last night at the ranch, they held a gathering. Apache warriors who'd fought beside them, Mexican families who'd sheltered Rosa, townspeople who'd chosen justice over prejudice, all came to say farewell. Mrs. Hartley presented them with a quilt, each square sewn by a different woman in town. "Remember us," she said simply, "and what we built together." The Apache elder who'd wanted to cast Lena out appeared at sunset. He'd aged in the weeks since, understanding dawning that the old ways alone couldn't navigate the new world. "Your father would be proud," he told Lena in Apache. "You kept honor while finding a new path." He presented her with a beaded medicine bag. "For your children, so they remember both rivers that flow in their blood." That night, as they lay in their empty house one last time, Lena traced patterns on Calder's chest. "Afraid, terrified," he admitted. "But excited too. We're not just saving ourselves anymore. We're building something." "My wise warrior," she teased, then grew serious. "Whatever comes, we face it." "Together," he finished. "Always." Morning came bright and clear, perfect for travel. Their small caravan formed Calder and Lena on horseback, Rosa and Esperanza in the wagon with their possessions, extra horses carrying supplies for the journey. As they passed through Cedar Falls one last time, the town seemed different. Some doors remained closed, faces turned away, but others waved, called out good wishes. At the general store, Mrs. Patterson ran out with candy for the road. "For the baby," she said, though Esperanza was too young. The gesture meant everything. The trading post sat at a crossroads, weathered but solid. Thornwood and Maria waited with the keys and ledgers, ready to hand over their life's work. "Treat it well," Thornwood said gruffly. "It's seen every kind of person pass through, never turned away anyone with honest need. We'll honor that," Calder promised. Their first night as traders, a family appeared at dusk, Chinese railroad workers seeking supplies, wary of rejection. Lena welcomed them in, speaking careful English mixed with gestures. They left with full packs and wonder in their eyes. "First of many," Calder said, watching them disappear into darkness. Within months, word spread. The Wyatt trading post became known as a safe harbor, a place where mixed couples could resupply without stares, where children of blended heritage could play freely, where different languages mingled like streams joining a river. Rosa learned the business quickly, her facility with numbers making her invaluable. Baby Esperanza grew strong, toddling between cultures, equally comfortable with Apache lullabies and Mexican folk songs and English nursery rhymes. On quiet evenings, Calder taught letters to whoever wanted to learn. His old dream of teaching found new form, the trading post's main room becoming an informal school. Apache children learned alongside Mexican vaqueros. Chinese workers practiced English while sharing their own written language. "You did it," Lena told him one night, watching him help a young Apache boy sound out words. "Became a teacher after all." "We did it," he corrected. "None of this works without you." By their first anniversary at the post, they had enough saved to buy land in Colorado. Roosevelt, now territorial administrator, helped secure a grant for their experimental community. "History will remember this," he said during his visit. "Not the battles, but what you built after." The day they received word that Prescott had been killed trying to rob a bank in Mexico, Calder felt only sadness for a wasted life. The man had chosen hate over humanity, and it had consumed him. "He could have had this," Lena said, gesturing to their thriving post, the garden where Rosa grew herbs, the children of various backgrounds playing in the yard. Community, purpose, peace. "Some people can't see past their own fear." Calder replied, "Thank God we can." Their second year brought unexpected joy. Lena's pregnancy. Doc Brennan traveled from Cedar Falls to attend the birth, bringing news of changes there too. Henshaw had become a judge, known for fair treatment regardless of race. Mrs. Hartley had started a school that welcomed all children. "Seeds you planted," Doc said, "growing even in your absence." Their son was born at dawn, strong and perfect. They named him Gabriel, herald of new things. Esperanza, now walking and talking, declared herself his protector. "Two children of the frontier," Rosa said, watching them together. "They'll grow up thinking this mixing of worlds is normal." "Good," Lena said fiercely. "Let them never know how strange we seem to others." Letters came from families who'd found refuge at their post, now establishing homes in Colorado, Montana, even Oregon. The network grew organic as sage, spreading wherever people of goodwill chose humanity over division. On Gabriel's first birthday, they hosted a celebration that would have seemed impossible years before. Apache drummers, Mexican guitarists, a Chinese dragon dance, Anglo fiddlers all sharing music while children ran between the performances, seeing no strangeness in the mixing. Calder stood with Lena, Gabriel in her arms, watching their created family celebrate. Rosa danced with a young vaquero who'd been courting her properly for months. Esperanza rode on Frank Tucker's shoulders he visited often, claiming the desert was too quiet without them. "No regrets?" Lena asked, following his gaze. "Only one," Calder said, "that it took so long to find you." She smiled, that transformation that still caught his breath. "Then we'd better make the most of the time we have." As sunset painted the desert in shades of fire and gold, Calder thought about journeys, how a moment of compassion at a hanging tree had led to this richness, how choosing to see a person instead of a race had opened worlds. The trading post would thrive, their Colorado settlement would grow. Their children would inherit a world slightly wider, slightly kinder because of stands taken and bonds forged. But those were tomorrow's stories. Tonight, there was music and laughter, family of blood and choice mingling like waters finding their level. Tonight, there was Lena's hand in his and their son's sleepy smile and the desert stars witnessing that love could indeed conquer all. They'd traveled far from that cottonwood tree, that first desperate rescue, but every mile had been worth it for this, a place where Apache and Anglo, Mexican and Chinese, all could find welcome, where children grew up bilingual and boundaries existed only on maps, not in hearts. The desert wind sang through the trading post eaves, and if it sounded like freedom, well, perhaps it was. In the great book of the Western frontier, their page was small but significant. They'd chosen love over fear, inclusion over isolation, hope over hatred, and in choosing, they'd changed their corner of the world. The stars wheeled overhead, eternal and patient, blessing all below who dared to build bridges where others saw only walls. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new travelers seeking safe harbor. Tonight they were home. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I hope it touched your heart as much as it did mine. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Drop a comment below, and let's share our thoughts about Calder and Lena's journey. If you enjoyed this tale of love conquering prejudice in the Old West, please subscribe to Wild West Night for more stories that celebrate the untold romances of the frontier. And don't forget to like this video and hit that hype button to help more people discover these powerful stories of love, courage, and redemption in the American West.